Thank you, Jonas. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody, and we'll go ahead and get started. I am really happy to be here with you all and to share about my dissertation research, something that I do with any presentation that I give. I do a quick introduction in my native language. So, Skugda, Shanyap Jugi, Dr. Jacelle Ramon-Sauberan, Shabwak, Amachit. So good day, and I'm Giselle. I go by Dr. J as well. But yeah, I do all sorts of different things. My full-time job is with the National Science Foundation NOR Lab, closely working with Kip Peak National Observatory, which is on one of the parcels of my reservation. We have 4 parcels that make up the whole Tohono O'odham Nation, and so the observatory sits on the main and the biggest parcel that we have. And I was actually just up on the mountain this morning giving a tour. And so also I an instructor at Tohono O'odham Community College. I teach within the Tohono O'odham Studies program there. And I was actually doing that full time before I came over to Kit Peak to be a liaison. And essentially, I'm a middle person between the Tohono O'odham Nation and the observatory. And I teach. I come from parents that are teachers, and so when I stepped from the faculty to the liaison, I couldn't totally walk away from it. But and yeah, I sit on several different boards. I'm a proud mom. My daughter Lydia, she's gonna be 6 next month. She just started kinder, and I have 6 nieces and 1 nephew, so I'm a really proud auntie as well. And I just want to note that the information that I'm sharing with you today is what has been passed down to me from generations before, and I do not speak for the whole Tohono O'odham Nation. But again, just really excited to be here and to share with you. And so, my dissertation research really starts with my family. And, these are some photos of my great grandparents and my grandma, my maternal grandmother, my hu'ud. And so, there's when I talk about my dissertation research, you'll see it. I get really excited about it. But also too, it's really near and dear to my heart because when it came time for me to decide what I wanted to write about, I went to my community. Yeah, I went to the Santa Cruz community and I said, what needs do we have? What's something that would be beneficial? And so being an oral society, we um had this knowledge of what happened within our community, which is really different. Our history in Santa Cruz is different than any other part or of the Tohono O'odham Nation or any community, or even and we have some similarities with our sister tribes, Gila River and Salt River, but again, it's just interesting because we have the Santa Cruz River, and so having this knowledge be passed on to me and then realizing that we were starting to lose this knowledge, from folks passing away, and maybe they did share a little bit or maybe they didn't, but again, it was having these knowledge holders or keepers, and my auntie Julia Roan Pearson is one of those people. And so talking with her and saying, what is the need? What do we need to do? And she's like, I really want to capture as many people as we can that are still around, and have them share and talk about, what they remember, what they were part of through many historical events that happened throughout time to protect our land and our water. And so, but this for me, this is really where it starts, and hearing these stories growing up from my hu'ud and, my mom and my aunties and then all these years later, it's really kind of like piecing things together has been an amazing experience. And, one of the things too is that in San Xavier, we're allottees or landowners, and not everybody is, but there are many families that are, and even families that aren't from San Xavier, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But for me, I am a future allottee, I'm a future landowner, so I need to know this history. And so I was able, to make this. my dissertation research and be able to be here today to present to you all and to create that living document that, I definitely talk to people in my community, elders, our tribal leadership, and say, and I said to them, is this okay for us to do? Because we are an oral society, and, I grew up traditional and respecting how we've done things for time immemorial. But I also said we're at a point now that we need to capture these some way, somehow. And everybody was okay with me, writing this all down and having this document. But also too, I did audio recordings with all the people I interviewed. And so, there's still the oral part to it as well that I was able to capture, which was really great, to have conversations. And even with, some of the people I interviewed, I've known them my whole life, and whether we're related or not, just learning, I'm like, you were a part of that and you did this. It was a lot of fun. And just again having those times to sit and talk with folks. And it was hard. I had to stop my research at one point in time because of the pandemic. But I tried my best to kind of keep momentum going and just, be able to do other things in the meantime, right? Until I could have conversations and sit down with people. And some of my interviews, they were done over Zoom. Not preferred, but that's what we did. But what I want to do is just kind of talk a little bit. Not sure, how much people know about our history. And so for O'odham, we are descendants of the Hohokam. And I know the spelling on here is different than you've probably seen, which is Hohokam. And so in O'odham, we say Hohokam, which, means those that are no longer here or simply our ancestors. And so, it's really amazing growing up to hear the stories of how like my great grandfather, my great great grandfather, and great great great, utilized what our ancestors created, which were canal systems to divert the water from Santa Cruz River, from the Gila River, the Salt River, east of Tucson, the San Pedro River. And my great grandfather, he still used those same canal systems to pull from the Santa Cruz and to irrigate into our farm fields, back in the 1800s. And so, and it's just amazing, that engineering to put these canal systems and build them. And some of them were like 6 feet deep. And so, living in the desert, it's not easy. You have to be very smart, but my ancestors figured it out, and they passed that knowledge on. Our creator Iitoi provided for us in different ways, and let us be able to live off of the land. And a lot of people think in the Sonoran Desert it's just hot, and yes, today it is 105 here, but with just a little bit of water and knowing where to go, the desert does provide. It is very fruitful, and there are, so much plants that we can live off of, and having us, be essentially what Thanatom translates to is desert people. We're made from the earth. We have direct connection and tie to it, right? And so seeing and knowing where things grow and knowing where to harvest and where there's good soil, knowing where your water is was another thing. So all of these things coming together and having that passed on. But I just wanted to mention that. And also too, the difference between you know, Western and then indigenous or native, or as we're talking about O'odham perspectives, and with um, anthropological, archaeological perspective of theories of what happened to my ancestors with drought, disease, kind of migrating with others. But then we have a story that talks about what happened, and it's a battle, but right now it is not winter, and because that's when we do our storytelling. But again, understanding the differences even with the word choice, right, and the pronunciations of the words. So and then here's a picture of the Casa Grande ruins, and that translates to big house. And so that is kind of the kind of what my ancestors left behind, which is really interesting. So if you've ever been a place to visit, and as you see here in this kind of like dark gray area where my mouse is looking at where my ancestors lived, which is very similar to what I'll show you on another upcoming map here. And then this is just a really great depiction of what life once was like. And there's another one too that I really like, and it has I think it's like a dog in the picture as well. I'm a big dog lover. But again, it's just really interesting just how we were able to know again where the water sources are and utilize them and have them be sustainable. And so that is something, with this with the Santa Cruz, is that we were able to maintain that water source for a very, very long time. And that's because of what was instilled in us as Autumn, is that you only take what you need. But then you have others that are from other backgrounds and other cultures, and they don't have that same mindset, and so they're trying to keep up with, what is now city of Tucson and it growing and being able to pull resources. And so then, again, you have some people coming in with not the same mindset, and then they're just taking and taking and taking until it's all gone. And so that's what happened with the Santa Cruz. But before we really dive into that, I also just wanted to, talk a little bit more. This is something that comes up in a lot, and so I've included a slide about it. Is that pre-contact? So before we as O'odham had any contact with whether Europeans, Spaniards, any of that groups of people, we were just known as O'odham. We were just people, and we were all just one, but we lived in family clusters along the rivers. So then when we had contact, and the first real contact we had with Father Eusebio Kino, who was a Jesuit priest born in Italy, but then was in Spain, and then was sent to what is now Tucson, to convert as many O'odham, and those any people really who did not follow the Catholic faith. And so when he met us, he became a friend of O'odham in San Xavier, but there's a language barrier. So, and also, along the lines of that, he didn't think that the O'odham living in my community, Santa Xavier, could be related to the O'odham living, on the east side of what is now known as Phoenix, or even, outside of Phoenix, like south of Phoenix. He did not think that there was the same, which we were. And so different names were given. And today we do have 5 groups of O'odham, and we all call each other sister tribes. And so you have Tohono O'odham, and then you have Akumet O'odham, which is Gila River Pima tribe. And then you have Ankh Akumet O'odham, which is Salt River Pima and Maricopa tribe. And then you do also have Akchin O'odham, Mouth of the Wash people. And then I always include Hiachin O'odham, even though they're not federally recognized. So the other 4 are and they're part of the 22 federally recognized tribes in the state of Arizona. But Hiachirot, unfortunately, they caught a bad rap from an anthropologist who said they were extinct. And so they've been trying since to become recognized. And they were actually umbrellaed under the Tohono Nation for quite some time. But then they're on their own and trying to seek federal recognition. But again, these 5 groups, we all call each other sister tribes. And Akumerata means river people. And then Ankh is specific to Salt River. And then as you see on the screen here, Akchin, mouth of the wash people. And that's in reference to one of our traditional ways of farming. And so it's Akchin farming, and it happens in the summertime when you flood. It's a technique where you flood your field when the monsoon rains hit. And so a lot of O'odham did that. But for us in Santa Xavier, we always had a river, we had a water source, river right there that was always flowing. And so again, also too, we live differently in the desert, and it's actually amazing how you can drive. You're in Tucson, you're in the desert, 4 hours north, you're in Flagstaff, you're in pine trees, right? So thinking about coming from say Tucson, Santa Xavier, Santa Xavier is just south of Tucson, and then you head west and the landscape changes. So if you've ever been like Tucson to Ajo, or say if you've driven to the checkpoint to go to like Puerto Penasco, Rocky Point in Mexico, on the Highway 86, you see how the landscape changes, in just a couple hours. But I just wanted to mention that, so if you ever were confused and wondering if, thought out the Mar relate to Gila River, we are. And we have different dialects of our language, and then also too, we do have similar uh traditions, but things also vary, just like how, from one house to another, you may do things just a little bit different. And that's just, that's kind of how we are. And here's a picture of my great great grandmother making a basket. Um, and I just love sharing old photos. And so, with the Santa Cruz, it's really interesting because it starts in the San Rafael Valley and actually heads south. And it goes into what is now known as Mexico. And it does this U-turn and then it heads back north. And so for O'odham, we lived all in this area, you know, all in here, um, which is which is now designated and part of Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area. And I do a lot of work with um, Tumacacori in here, Tubac, Canoa Ranch, all these areas, because that's where my ancestors lived all along in here. And it's just beautiful, with having the Santa Cruz River. And in O'odham, we call it Adi Akamel, because it is a small river. There's a lot of pictures that, that will be shared, like time capsule photos from the Arizona Daily Star. And some of those are really great photos, but it doesn't note that some of them were right after a monsoon rainstorm. So it looks like this big roaring raging river and it's not. As you see in this picture, it's very narrow. So Adi Akamel is like a small child, or like a small kind of descriptive word of how the river looked. And so, but yeah, this is what it looked like one point in time. I went to the Arizona Historical Society to get photos and be able to weave throughout my dissertation paper. And and so again, this is kind of hard to see because of the shadows, but you can again just see also too how lush it was along the Santa Cruz, in my lifetime, most of the time, it's just been barren, right? And there's nothing growing, there's no water unless it rains. But I loved hearing those stories from my hoot growing up, my maternal grandmother, and her talking about it because the water was still flowing when she was a kid. And this photo on the right here is like exactly what I pictured when she told me the stories of how she would go down there with her grandma and play in the river, and they would collect water in pottery, big huge potteries that got hot, and they carry it on their head back to their houses. They would wash clothes, like all of that. And so being able to find photos, I'm like, this is amazing. So it's really neat, as I'm a very visual person, to kind of make these connections in different ways, and just be able to carry on those stories, that my grandma shared with me because she's no longer here. And even with my older sister too, it's been fun where I'm just like, did grandma ever tell you this story? Or like, no. And so again, us trading stories and sharing with each other. So remember that map I showed you a few slides ago that highlighted kind of that blue gray area of my ancestors. So this is a similar map showing kind of in that general area as well for the ancestral land of the O'odham. And the solid orange you see is highlighting two of our four parcels that make up our reservation. So we're very fortunate that we've never been removed from our ancestral lands like other tribes have been. And in some cases, those tribes that were perhaps east of the Mississippi when the Removal Act happened. They were pushed west and then further west, and so they could have easily, been removed 2 to 4 times. I've heard stories, and I even worked for some tribes that did experience being removed 3 times. And so for us, we never experienced that. Instead, our ancestral land just shrunk to what we have today as our main reservation. It's 2.8 million acres. It's the size of the state of Connecticut. And like I mentioned earlier, there's 4 parcels. They're not all connected. And they were uh, designated as part of our reservation different times, and it was done by executive order. And so where I come from, in Santa Xavier, it was the first parcel that was established in 1874. And so that's what this little square is right here. And then there's another parcel up here near Gila Bend, Arizona. It's called San Lucy. That was in the 1880s. And then this main parcel you see right here that I'm circling with my cursor, that was 1920s. And then around 1960s, there's another parcel in Florence, Arizona. It's real small, about 40 acres that was given to us. And so that's what makes up the Tohono O'odham Nation. And like other tribes too, many whether willingly or not, signed treaties, and for us, we never signed a treaty. So again, everything was done by executive order. Um, and also to thinking about names, and for us, our name for Tucson was Jukshan, and it's been really neat in the last few years here how we've started to see people utilizing that more and more, and that is in reference to a spring that was at the base of Black Mountain, which is Sentinel Peak. So if you've been to Tucson and where the University of Arizona Big A is, that um, mountain right there below now where Mission Garden is reference to this Jukshan because our ancestors situated themselves nicely between Black Mountain, as we called it, and then the Santa Cruz River, and we were right there. And a lot of them did that all along the Santa Cruz in what is now known as Tucson. And so, also to another uh, name on here for Arizona, Audichon, so small base, in reference to the landscape, the land. So, but this is a big area of land that we would travel, and on my other slide, I didn't go over it, but mentioning how, there were those that were semi-nomadic, nomadic, and then, having the different homes based on the season, so semi-nomadic. And then those that were just kind of roamers that kind of went down to the ocean and came back up and, following our ancestors' old trade routes. And then for us in Santa Cruz, we were a little bit different. We really we didn't have to move. Everything was nicely, we situated ourselves nicely around like how this I mentioned with the name of Jukshan, same thing. We have our sacred mountain, we have our farm fields, the San Xavier del Bac mission now, and then we have the Santa Cruz. And so again, having all of this all around us and nicely situating ourselves. And so um fun, kind of just fun fact background. San Xavier del Bac was built in 1797. And Father Kino actually came to San Xavier the first time in 1697. And, he helps get the construction and the building of the first, I guess you could say, like, first version of the mission. But unfortunately, that didn't last. And so it had to be rebuilt. And, but what you see there today, also known as the Dove in the Desert, was finished in 1797. So I share all this background information because I feel like it's important now getting into talking about the history of land and water in Santa Xavier. So, um, I did, like I mentioned at the beginning, really talking with my auntie and others to figure out like what would be helpful, what would be useful, because we have a lot of people, that inherit being a landowner, being um, you know, or as we, kind of falling into this and not knowing the history, not knowing what it means, not knowing how important it is. So that was kind of like one part of it of like, okay, they need to understand, because if you can't, talk about or even plan for the future, so you can't talk about in the present or plan for the future if you don't know the history, right? So I wanted to give um current or even future landowners an opportunity to get the full picture, right? So they have a really good solid understanding. But then also too, I just wanted to provide this for whether you were at them or not, this resource that you could learn from and understand, you know, like the Southern Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act, SWRSA, wanting to know more about the Santa Vera Cooperative Farm. You had this resource to be able to pull from and to learn from. So it really came to be this like multi-layered, multi-audience in putting this all together. But again, it just really started from a conversation with my mom and like my auntie and talking about it. And also for me too, being like, you know what, I've asked questions, probably since I was like middle school on up, but I really don't know the full story myself either. And I'm like, I kind of like picked up on things, and there's meetings held for our allottees, but again, I'd ask questions, I'm like, oh, okay, like kind of confused, kind of getting it. So, but that really led me into putting this together. So, this is a map of the different areas in Santa Xavier. So today we're one community, one district, and how we're structured is if you thought of the Tohono O'odham Nation as its own country, similar to the United States, um, we have districts, 11 districts that are equivalent to our states. And within states, you have cities and towns. Within our districts, we have communities and villages. But each district, like the states, you have a, governing body, you have people in charge. We have the same in the districts. And so we have a chairperson, a vice chair that oversees the whole district. And if there's multiple communities, like one of our districts that I work closely with, Shukdawak District, they have 9 communities. But for my own district where I come from, again, it's one community, one district. And so then beyond that, though, looking at the whole Tohono O'odham Nation, we're a 3-branch government. So we have our executive, our legislative, and our judicial. And so the chairman and vice chairwoman we have now oversee everything on the Tohono O'odham Nation, but our legislative committee is similar to Congress, and so they're the ones making the decisions. And then we have our own judicial system. We have our own judges. We have a jail. We have our own police department, fire. All of that within the Tohono O'odham Nation. So again, just kind of explaining that and setting that up for you. And so, but prior to like all of the resources and how we're structured today, um, a lot of our not only our tribe but other tribes, nations, indigenous people went through these different eras. And so there's American Indian history eras. And so one of those eras is the allotment era. And unfortunately, many of these eras were to assimilate us, to take land from us, and there was a lot of not so great things that um, were done to us as Native and Indigenous peoples. But we are resilient, and it's really amazing to see what my community did in terms of decolonizing. So, um, one of the things that we went through was allotment, and we're actually the only community that went through allotment, because we were the only reservation parcel established. So the General Allotment Act, or known as the Dawes Act, was created in 1887. Santa Xavier was established as a reservation in 1874. And um following that, you have this allotment act that comes through, which was to assimilate us and to make us farmers, ranchers, or harvesters of timber. But in Santa Xavier, we had been farming for time immemorial. So we were actually one of the first tribes to go through allotment. And I had some really interesting conversations with um O'odham scholars, O'odham elders, and just other scholars from other tribes, and just, my dissertation committee members talking about this and being like, why do you think that is? And in my opinion, it was because there wasn't any assimilation happening for O'odham in Santa Cruz. It was more so just coming in and dividing the land and giving us, kind of, again, paperwork. Like, this is your parcel, number 101, kind of thing. And so 1890, there was 292 allotments, and that equaled 41,000 acres. And my family were one of the original families from Santa Cruz, and so great grandfather, great great grandfather, are original allotment holders. And so you didn't have to be from Santa Cruz to become an allottee or be, given a parcel of land. If you were at them and you were there on that day in 1890, you were given a parcel. And so it's interesting that we do have families from outside of Santa Cruz that are allottees. And then also too, like I mentioned, not everybody from Santa Cruz is a latte. So, but it's really complex and it's complicated because those 292 people that got those allotments, it has now, I know it says 1800 on here, but it's more like 1900 allottees, landowners today, because the parcels become fractionated. So say you had a big family of 10 kids. And I'll let you do the math. And you were given the biggest parcel, which was, you could get 40, 60, 80, or 160 acres based on the size of your family. So of course, like if you were single, you'd get 40, but if you had a big family of like 10, you'd get 160. So say you are the landowner, you're the allottee, then you pass away, and so does your spouse. So then it goes to your kids. So you have 160 acres that's divided among 10 kids. And then say all your 10 kids all have 10 kids. You kind of get how it works. And so, and that's how it grows to be more landowners or lottees in this sense. And it also introduced individualism to us, which is nothing that is, at the time that was nothing we knew about. We didn't function like that. We were communal. The relationality in our community. And so from stories that were passed down, and even I remember my grandma telling me was that after this happened, it really didn't affect us in Santa Cruz. Everybody just was like, okay, so there's now these like lines drawn essentially, and they're like, and kept on living how we always had been. But it wasn't until later, when the Santa Cruz River started to be depleted, and we started to notice this around the 1900s, that, we needed to kind of start talking and coming together more so on these particular issues as allottees. But what stopped this, and another part to this too, is another, I guess, part to it was that we were put on reservations, but then we were having allotment, so then the reservations would then be divided, and once all the land was divided into, these, say, 100 allotments, say, for a different tribe, um, then that excess land was sold. But for us, it was interesting because there wasn't any like excess land. What was left over from the allotted land was just put in charge of our district leadership. And so, again, just really interesting how things kind of panned out over time. And so, what ended allotment was the reorganization era in 1935 through 1953. And so, that actually reorganization is when tribal governments were first established. So, and so this is what it looks like in my community. And what I meant by like that, the excess land, this is what's all in green here. That's what wasn't allotted. And typically for some other tribes, then this was sold off to settlers. But for us, it wasn't. It remained within our reservation district boundaries. But all of these here are the 292 allotments. And as you can see, Interstate 19, which goes to Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Mexico, runs right through. And then also, this is another major street, Mission Road, that runs through. So, but again, so that's like one thing that happened. And, um, and it's like kind of things are leading up. And I'll do a recap here, but, so just kind of stay with me as we're talking here. And so then, seeing how we had individualism introduced us, but again, we're just kind of like, well, we're just gonna keep living our best lives, doing um what we want, how we've been doing things, how how everything's been. Then that's what I mentioned, the water is starting to be depleted, because then you had out farmers are growing their crops around us. And then city of Tucson started to grow and looking for water. And in the Santa Cruz River, there's aquifers. And so, again, just kind of that idea of like different mindsets of like, here we are as O'odham being able to maintain this river, all these different rivers. And then others that are not from our tribe, you know, um, start to take it. And then next thing we know, the water is completely gone. And we watched it slowly deplete until there was nothing. And then even wells were drilled in the 1920s, and, taking all from underground, and depleting the groundwater, aquifers, all of that, till there's absolutely nothing. So about 1940 is when there was no water flowing in the Santa Cruz River. And so what did that mean for us in Santa Xavier? Farming became something we could not do. And we started to lose our traditional ecological knowledge. But then also, too, we had other um, things happening, like tribal members going to boarding schools, going to serve in the wars, so there was also generational loss, where you don't have the people that are at home that used to work the farm fields teaching the younger generations. They're gone, right? So all of these little things start to happen over time. And, at one point in time, we were um, growing like 1 million pounds of tepary beans, and tepary beans is one of our traditional foods. And then we went to maybe 100 pounds in this kind of time period. And so you start to see this loss, and we can't farm anymore like year round, almost like we were. And so we had to rely on auction farming, so only done in the summertime. But then we also had allottees leasing out their land, because they're like, well, I can't farm it, but there was others like a Chinese and also a white farmer that wanted to utilize our land, and they were hauling water in. But then they were using chemicals in the ground and in their crop, and that really hurt our land, our Judaga as we call it. And so my community, they're, I'm really proud of them because they got together and said, we need to do something. And so, first thing they did was form the a cooperative of landowners in order to piece some of the land back together and find a way to farm again. So there was an individual. He's an amazing person, Clifford Pablo, who was tasked with going to all these different landowners in Santa Xavier, allottees, and saying, can we use your land to create what is now today known as the Santa Xavier Cooperative Farm? And everybody said yes. It was all in good faith. Like, let's do this. Let's not lose our traditional ecological knowledge, or also referred to as TEK. Let's do this. And so that happened in 1971. And so that was like the first step of putting everything together. But then, and here's Clifford, and he went to 46, people for their allotments, and everybody said yes. My family was included in this as well. And so then, excuse me, this is what the farm looks like today. But it did not start off like this. The land was hurt. There had to be healing done to bring it back to a healthy state. And Clifford was that person who did it. Like, he is the reason we are thriving today at our co-op farm. And we have amazing people that are working there, that worked under Clifford, that have guidance, and he goes and checks on them too, which is really great. He's a farm manager at Tohono O'odham Community College, runs a really great agricultural extension internship program there. But again, it's like these individuals were just like, they were passionate about caring and taking care of the land because we were put here to be caretakers of it. So that's what we've done, in different ways. And this is my grandma, and I like this picture because Clifford shared it with me, for one. And second, that's what the farm looked like when Clifford was working on, and she's actually eating sugar cane, wild sugar cane. So think about that, how the farmland looked and then what it now looks like. And so present day, there's 1,200 acres with 800 being farmed, but there's more great things happening there. Definitely look up their website. And so then, these are some of our tepary beans I mentioned. And then we take mesquite right here. These are the pods from mesquite trees, and we mill it into flour. And so, again, all of these things happening, but then we said, well, we're piecing the land back together. We're decolonizing allotment, but we need water. How are we going to get water? And so, following that 1975, 4 years later, after the co-op is established, we as a allottees, as a community, as a tribe, file a lawsuit against agricultural businesses, or owners, sorry, the copper mine, because just south of my community there is a copper mine there, and that's a whole different story for a different day, of land being leased to them to utilize, and the what comes from the tailings being kind of underground, and the land not being able to be utilized in any way. Anyways, so copper mines, city of Tucson, and holding them accountable and responsible for draining or depleting the aquifers in our water source. So it took quite some time. My Auntie Julie, she was part of this, um, and making sure and helping and being at endless meetings to have the Southern Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act passed in 1982. And there's others too from my community. Most are gone, unfortunately, that were there to make this possible, and the just the perseverance and just the commitment, and the again what's instilled in us to take care of things. And to and so they fought and one point in time it wasn't almost signed, but we have allies too. And so that was really great to have the Udall brothers, in this case, Morris Udall, help us. We've had Stuart Udall that helped us with other things relating to our saguaro fruit harvest. But again, having folks that were there to help us, and even others out, that were there, helping us because they had a law background. They're like, what's happening isn't right. So we want to help in any way. So people came forward, to help us. If you're familiar with Bunny Fontana, he was another person too, and bringing in allies and people he knew. Um, and so, again, things took time and were again, like I mentioned, almost not signed, but finally went through. And it was because of this act that brought water to Tucson, because at one point in time it was iffy if it was. And so we have water, that the Central Arizona Project water, CAP, that comes from the Colorado River. And so once we got it, it wasn't like, yay, we instantly had water. It took an additional like almost 20 years before we saw that water, this 50,000 acre feet of water, come to San Xavier. Because what did you need to do? You had to build the pipeline to come all the way here, right? And so today, the Santa Cruz Co-op Farm relies 100% on the CAP, which, is problemsome, to think about, and always talking about climate change and, water, and seeing the water levels be depleted. And, all of these different things are definitely on our radar as a community. We are talking about it. But again, this led to other things happening in the community, in terms of creating a Santa Cruz Latte Association, which is a organization that is there to help with the having a lattes come together to talk about issues at hand, land, water issues, land developers wanting to come in and bringing proposals and different things like that. That was all created later on. But it also helped us create different things we needed for our community and as a tribe, like a water resources committee, a water department. Like all of these things came by all of these major historical events that happened. Um, and so I know I'm running out of time, but wanting to kind of get through the last of my slides. And so these are some really great articles that I found during my research. And this is my grandma again, and her best friend Sally Estrada, very vocal in the community. And then this is my other grandma. So in Othamway, my grandma and all her siblings are my grandma and grandpa's. So which would be like a great aunt or great uncle. And so this is my grandma's her sister, my other grandma. And so fighting and it was just really cool to see, and to kind of just see what was happening. So last thing, right? So we get the land divided into 292 acres, or I'm sorry, allotments on 41,000 acres. That was the first part, right? Then our water gets depleted, but then we piece the land back together, and then we file a lawsuit to then finally, kind of hold those people accountable. Or we didn't, kind of, we did. And then, you know, um, having it pass and then waiting for the water to come back. And then on top of that, all around the same time, we get this Santa Cruz Properties come in and propose a land development. And so those people that have kind of stood and fought, and you really, this is kind of like, think around this time, it really is the first you're seeing activism happen in my community. And this person, on behalf of the Santa Cruz Properties comes in and says, hey, you know what? Like, we want to build this city of 100,000 just south of Santa Xavier, but we want to use some of your land. So we want, you know, about 18,000 acres, 16,000 from allottees, 2,000 from kind of that green area I showed you on the map, tribally held. And, we're going to build golf courses, just make it this really awesome place, but it wasn't necessarily for us. And so you can see on this picture here that was from a newspaper article of what it would have looked like. And I can't imagine, like, there's times where I'm at the mission and I look south and I'm like, I could not like even fathom if this had gone through. And it was just how it was done, where it was like they kind of didn't include necessary people, and at one point it was approved, but it shouldn't have been. So if you get my drift, they're really back and forth on things. And this took so this was like late 1970s, and it wasn't probably until almost close to 1990 when this was finally squashed, and it wasn't going to happen. And people again stuck with it and fought and said, because there was different things being told to us that you know weren't true necessarily. And again, it was just all of this back and forth, and it did divide our community for quite some time. um and it was just again amazing to hear from all these individuals of what they did, and how again that passion and that dedication. And so they stuck with it to the very end. And this individual in this picture here, Mike Enos Sr., but he actually passed away some years ago, but I got to interview him about this, and it was really cool. We got to do it on video. He was okay with it being on video, but it was less than a month after we did the interview that he passed away. And so a big part of what my writing and what I did was that a lot of this was happening before I was born. um and I wanted as many individuals as I could to tell the story of what happened. So it's really, I'm weaving that in throughout the whole paper, and you're hearing it from firsthand accounts of these individuals that lived it, that were there, that were fighting. And so all of these things led to creating a general land use plan, a vision plan, a community plan, all of these things in my community that were really important to have. And so in the last minute I have here, we really came full circle with a lot of things, and it's really cool to see, because a true blessing is that we now have, because of having that Central Arizona Project water, we're able to have that, and we have different areas where we utilize it, riparian areas. And so we're able to recharge our groundwater, and we're able to drink our groundwater in Santa Xavier once again. And we have that aquifer flowing, which has been flowing since about 2018. And so it's a really true blessing for us to have that. And I started my dissertation research talking about water flowing in the past, but then I ended my dissertation with talking about it in the present, and having my generation, my daughter's generation, be able to see water flowing again is something amazing that we have in our community. And so here are a couple photos that I took some time ago of that water flowing. It now looks totally different. This photo is a couple years old, but it's amazing of just all of the trees and plants and everything that is growing, and amazing with just a little bit of water can do in the desert. And I remember we had some students we took down there, and they were like, so when did you plant all this? And we're like, we didn't, it's just been monitored. And now we're having baby cottonwood trees growing up in um the area close to here. So it's just again been really amazing, to see what has transpired, and understanding the past, to talk about it now in the present, and then to plan for our future, is really big in my community. And my paper, which I wanted it to be a resource, and seeing it be a resource has been really something truly amazing. with different community members. The Santa Cruz Co-op Farm, it helped a lot of their staff have a better understanding so they can look at their um, different plans that they have and that they're working on, like 5-year plans and, looking at how they're gonna move forward and what they want to do. So, with that, I want to turn it back over so for questions. And thank you all for coming. And like I said, anytime I can talk about my dissertation research, I love to.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Giselle. Um, so we're coming up on a few minutes after 5, so may not have time to get to all these questions. But one of the participants wants to know, what are the pros and cons of not signing a treaty?
So that's really interesting because um for us, there when you look back in history, a lot of the treaties there was promises made in those treaties, but today some of those some tribes are still trying to get what was made in these treaties back in the 1800s. So everything that, if they were going to get X amount of land or if they're getting this or that, hasn't all come to them, or they were lied to in some cases when it came to what was again said in the treaty. But for us it was when executive order, it was designating areas of land to us, that this is our land, this is where we're able to live, and following that, being able to govern ourselves and structure ourselves the way that we want to.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. Let's see. There's another one here. This will probably be the last one we're able to get to. Is there any relationship between the O'odham people in Mexico and the people you spoke of today, your people?
Yeah, so on the one picture I was showing you where I had the ancestral land in the dotted orange, and then the solid in the solid orange, and then there was dots that you saw in Mexico. So when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the Gadsden Purchase were signed in 1800s, that divided our land and created 74 miles of the US Mexico border on the main part of our reservation, or that main parcel. So it divided our ancestral land in half, and we didn't have a say on what side of the border that we wanted to be on. So we have them that are Mexican citizens. We have about 2,000 that live in Mexico, but we have our own port of entries that travel back in, that tribal members can use and travel back and forth, whether you're on the US side or the Mexico side. So those residing in Mexico can use those to come utilize any of our tribal services, like healthcare that we have on our capital, was capital, which is called cells. And so but yeah, so that's kind of something that's border issues and everything. It's not something that happened yesterday for us, that we've stood up to voice our concerns and to stand up against. That's something that happened in the 1800s, because we were never part of the conversation. It happened without us knowing it, and it's really interesting. We go back further in time where it was like we were just living our best lives, but yet we became part of New Spain. Then we became part of Mexico, and then we became part of the United States. But we didn't move. We were just, again, living our lives, but everything else was shifting around us, right? But we never had a say in any of it. And so, but we do have a relationship with our Homachicama, as we say, our people that are in Mexico. And we did have a lieutenant governor in place that was elected to kind of serve as a middleman between both countries to help. But there's also some really great individuals that grew up in Mexico that are, establishing different things, like a small cultural center, just being able to meet and talk and, know one another. So
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer some of these questions. And we apologize to the rest of you who we do not have time to get to the rest of those questions. Thank you guys for tuning in today. There's lots of positive comments in the chat. I don't know if you've had a chance to look, Giselle, but very, very greatly received. So thank you so much for your time. We want to be respectful of everybody else's time as well. So we will see you guys next week. Thank you again.